Welcome to the Dad Nation podcast, where men go from good to great in their life and love. Now more than ever, our world needs strong, courageous, and compassionate men, because we believe that when the dad gets better, the whole family wins. Now, this movement is called Dad Nation, but ultimately this is for the wives, the children, and the generations to come, because we also believe that every wife and child deserves a father who is pursuing greatness. I am your host, Mitchell Osman, and I am so grateful and I'm humbled that you've chosen to spend your most precious resource, which is your time, with me today. Listen, today we've got another incredible episode for you, so let's get into it. All right, Travis, welcome to the Dad Nation podcast. Now, I just want to read a little bit about your bio here, just so that the people listening will just kind of know exactly about who you are and all the credentials you have. So, Travis is a licensed marriage and family therapist and a mind and body coach. He has been practicing for over the past 10 years. Yeah. He has further expertise, training, and certification in attachment-focused EMDR, focused-oriented training, FOT, certified felt sense polyvagal. Is that how you say that?
Yeah. Right on.
Model facilitator, emotionally focused couples therapy, and dialectical behavioral therapy. Man, I should have tried to read this before we got on the call.
It's kind of a soup there.
It's good. But he's been married for 14 years to his amazing wife, Anna, and resides in Southern California with his family. And they have 2 boys and a girl, Shepherd, Eli, and Iva.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, great. Iva.
Yeah.
Travis is passionate about continuing to grow as a father, husband, friend, and therapist. Life in the Goodman family usually consists of lots of music, playing, cooking, exploring the outdoors, wrestling and tickling matches, and making up funny songs together. And as the host of the video podcast, The Integrated Man Project, Travis invites you to hear and share in the journey towards integration psychologically, physically, socially, and spiritually. The podcast is organized around the integration of holistic health, well-researched, evidence-based education, conversations with experts, along with practical applications. And so the mission of the Integrated Man Project is to create a space that aims to equip men around the world with tools, inspiration, and resources needed to be the best man they can be. Travis, thank you so much for being here on the show. I apologize for butchering the first half of your bio, but dude, it sounds good. And I know that we've just, even through conversations that you and I have had together before this recording date, we share so many similarities and passions when it comes to our demographic. And so I'm just personally really excited to talk with you today. I know that you are going to have so much value to share with our guys. So thanks for being on the show, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And it's always fun hearing my my thing being read. I'm always like, oh yeah, I need to truncate it more. I don't know. It feels long to me, but maybe for everyone, it's fine.
Hey man, don't shy away from sharing all those goodies, dude.
Yeah.
I don't remember how I got connected to you, but do you remember?
Was it Tattooed Husband?
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
I think
Tattooed
right?
Husband. Yeah, he connected us.
Yeah.
But yeah, man. Either way, thank you, Tattooed Husband, wherever you are right now.
Yeah. Well, so I'll tag you in this podcast and so you could listen to.
There you go. There you go. Well, let's talk about some things, man, because there's some recurring challenges that I walk into with men. A big one is anger. Right. Another big one is not knowing how to handle the stress that they carry. Not even knowing how to articulate how they feel about the stress they're feeling. Mm-hmm. And another thing is, I literally had this conversation with a guy this morning about suppressing and what has been happening in his personal life when he suppresses his needs and his desires in his relationship, and what happens and how that manifests, and how it begins to manifest in different things like porn, drinking, drugs, whatever, addiction, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I just mentioned some huge concepts in like 30 seconds. Sure. So I understand it's going to take a while to unpack these, but within the 60 minutes, I'd love to talk about some of these things. So if you don't mind, let's talk about anger for a second, because this is something that I'm particularly passionate about. I personally, I don't see anything wrong with anger. in
Hmm.
itself. I think it's a signal. Our
Hmm.
emotions are signals. But I think that the challenge we get into is how we express that anger. And I
Right.
think, especially, we both live, in the social media world, and so speaking about anger can be tricky because some people are so quick to say, "Well, men are angry and they're toxic and they're, whatever, because they're so aggressive, they're so angry, and
Mm.
you can't be angry, no more anger." And so let's unpack that a little bit. So number one, I guess, do you how do you perceive anger, and why, and how we as men can have
Yeah.
a maybe a healthier relationship with anger?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, it's a great question. So I would agree with your first thing. It's a signal, number one. Number two, it's human. Um, that's a human emotional state reaction, whatever you want to call it. Physiological, emotional, psychological. So, all those things, those domains. And that's kind of, anecdotally what we notice is that, it is human. But number three, most importantly, according to polyvagal theory, which is like one of my certifications, is that whole theory is all based upon, which was discovered by Dr. Stephen Porges back in the 90s. Not that he discovered anything new, but he added a branch. So it's about the vagus nerve, and the vagus nerve is running at the bottom of the brainstem down into the heart and the gut. It's like the longest kind of nerve, cranial nerve. Essentially, what that does, and this is where everyone's going to be like, "Oh yeah," essentially it controls your autonomic nervous system. So fight, flight, freeze. Your parasympathetic nervous system. So going back to like whenever we learned that in science class, I forget when, maybe junior high, I forget. Um, but what he found was that really that the nervous system's job, in essence, is survival. So if we put anger in terms of the nervous system, which I think is a great way to do it because this is backed by science and by research that it is an emotion that we experience. It's a signal, and it's also more than that. So anger and anxiety are kind of two sides of the same coin in the sense that they activate our sympathetic nervous system state, which is our state of mobilization. So that's our first line of defense to a perceived threat. And I say perceived because in our day and age, we don't really have, unless you're a hunter, you don't really have bears running at you or cougars. It does happen, but um, or at war, those that are going to war, or first responders, they might face more of like that type of threat, life threatening, where they kind of get activated into a fight flight state. Um, Now, more realistically, what we probably experience, and probably most of the men and women listening to your podcast and mine, is more of we could have perceived threat from probably your spouse, your kids, your boss, a random stranger cutting you off in the middle, on the freeway. That's really what we tend to experience more of. And so, anger, in terms of the nervous system, serves a purpose. And the purpose that anger serves when it's used correctly is to mobilize us to move toward the threat, to address the threat effectively, whatever that might look like. And then the anger will suppress it. And then we'll move out of a sympathetic nervous system state, the state of mobilization, down into what we call the ventral or parasympathetic state, which is your kind of calm, grounded, kind of the state we're in right now. Unless I'm a threat to you, then maybe you're numbing
I
out or
feel
something there.
threatened. I'm triggered.
Yeah,
Sorry.
you should feel super triggered. You're very toxic. And sorry, I had to do that. And so anger in that sense, it's a mobilizing emotion that activates our whole being physiologically to effectively deal with a threat when it's done effectively. And anxiety is the same, but it's the flight state, right?
Hmm.
Anxiety is mobilizing you to flee from the threat. Anger is mobilizing you to head toward the threat, essentially,
Gotcha.
right? And so healthy uses of anger, right, would be if you see an injustice happening, that will mobilize you to, I'm going to go deal with this thing, right? Or if your kids are fighting and someone gets hurt. Now, if you do it effectively, you'll be mobilized to go in to move toward the threat. Someone got hurt, and if you're grounded, to then effectively diffuse the situation with the kids or whatever and get everyone connected, right? Now, when anger, as we know, is ineffective, when we get stuck in anger, that's when we kind of also activate more than just that kind of that quick activation of fight flight. But now we're releasing cortisol and adrenaline. That's when we're getting stuck in the fight state. And then that's when we can be more reactive, not responsive, reactive. And reactivity often looks like outbursts of yelling, screaming, even physical altercations to some degree. And that could be external as well as internal, right? And that's when it would be not an effective use of anger. So anger is effective and serves a purpose. But going back to what you said, it's about, well, what we do with it does matter. Anger is an emotional state that's a signal that it's a nervous system state. We can't not have that. In fact, to not be angry, if you try to suppress that, that's going to cause also a whole slew of issues because we're also trying to stop our nervous system from doing what it's supposed to do and how it's wired biologically to effectively address our environment. But for some of us, we might have to do a lot of rewiring and reworking around our nervous system states in anger. Because for a lot of the guys that I've worked with who have that more heightened, quick rush of anger and frustration and irritability and aggression, often there's a story there as to why that's such a quick trigger for them to be more reactive versus responsive. I think some of it has to do with lack of awareness. Some of it has to do with early childhood experiences from family, from school, from socialization around what it means to be masculine and what, often society says anger is an okay thing. Well, part of society growing up is like, hey, show this, but then we're told it's bad. And so we have this kind of dichotomy of like, well, this was only allowed to feel anger often as a kid or express any other emotion I was shamed for, sadness, anxiety. But anger was kind of in a way praised. Sports fields, right? Football. Like think of all the sports we do that's aggression. It's like, good job, go for it. And so we learn that, hey, this is an okay thing to do as boys. But then we get into relationships as adults and husbands or whatever, later on, we may not know how to effectively regulate it because maybe we never knew how to do it. Maybe we didn't have the skills or tools necessary. Some men have a lot of trauma around life. And so anger might have been their only way to navigate it effectively to help best keep them alive and to survive. So it's another time we use anger ineffectively, but it might be adaptive when we're young, but then when we get older, it kind of has diminishing returns. Another thing where anger can happen is if, we had a lot of emotional neglect or lack of validation growing up. And so we learned that to be seen, to be heard was to kind of force ourselves being seen or being heard through some level of aggression or acts because then we're acknowledged, even if it's negative acknowledgement. Because one of the worst things we experience as human beings is not so much negative reinforcement. It's about the lack of any connection at all. And so that's why you see kids act out is because they'd rather have the negative than nothing. Because nothing is like the worst thing we could all experience for most people. And I'm generalizing here. So that's kind of anger in a nutshell. So really, it's a nervous system response to perceived threat. And when used effectively, it is actually effective for us and those around us. When used ineffectively, that's when we get into I'm going to put quotes on this for those that are listening, toxic, not masculinity, but I'd say toxic traits and I would actually get away from the word toxic and say more unbalanced, immature, unhealthy manifestations of masculinity. That's how I would describe it.
It's a great way of describing it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's way less catchy, but it's certainly more effective.
Yes. And that's what I'm trying to be effective here. They're like, hey, no, masculinity itself is not toxic. We could be immature, we could have unbalanced, unhealthy. But masculinity in itself, just like femininity, they're not toxic, but we could be very immature about it. And that's when it looks toxic. But masculinity in itself is not toxic. And that's the part that the lines get blurred a lot with social media is then we just see masculinity in its entirety as this evil thing. And that is not a healthy conversation or effective by any stretch of the imagination to actually bring any healing. So, and that's even shown in the research.
Yeah. I have this conversation with men often that I believe that a truly masculine man, a strong man, is in control.
Yes.
Is aware, is emotionally intelligent, can lower his heart rate if need be. I talk with a lot of men who think the opposite. I've got to put my foot down. I've got to I'm going to raise my voice. I'm going to yell. I'm going to show them who's the man, so to speak. To which I say, a truly masculine, strong man would have the maturity to exercise emotional control in this moment. So if you want to be masculine, if you want to be a strong man, lower your voice, lower your heart rate, and
Hmm.
you know what I mean? Exercise emotional control.
Yeah.
So I say all that to say I 100% agree with you, man. And I think not only does society get it wrong, but even us as men, there's a lot of men that don't even understand that about themselves, you
Hmm.
know, and
Yeah.
that's for a lot of reasons. I mean, I didn't. It took me a long time to realize that as well. I love what you said about the negative attention. Because I think apathy is so much more painful than hate. I talked with a guy named Dan Peterson. Have you ever met him before?
Mm-mm.
So he's a child behavioral therapist, and he coaches parents
Hmm.
on how to parent their children who are dysregulated and show behavioral patterns of concern. And he talked a lot about that in the episode about
Nice.
how kids will act out, and they will if you show them negative attention, they're going to keep doing it because it's
Sure.
better than no attention, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, how are you actually reinforcing or how are you instilling behavioral patterns in them by
Yep.
simply responding the wrong way, right?
Yeah.
Just
Yep.
a wild thing.
No, when you think about that, it gives you a whole perspective as to why people do what they do.
Yeah.
And for some, and that's why some kids get labeled as the bad, the trouble kid. But like in a way that's how he's getting connection. And some personalities, by the way, thrive on kind of a conflictual connection.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're driven to kind of push and resist against um, the status quo, which is actually a really good trait as if it's healthy. But the unhealthy version is when they get stuck in that pushing too far and then they can't control that push and they just know that, hey, I'm getting connection here, but it's an unhealthy connection versus how do I use that push in a healthy, effective way? And that's often that's a good quality to have, the ones that push back. Something else I've seen in men too that can happen is they don't push back, but they flip and become the pleaser. So they please everybody. So they use that anger, often go inward and beat themselves up, and then they kind of, well, I gotta just please everybody else, and they suppress their feelings. And so the anger gets suppressed, but then it comes out usually internally often as a kind of a pretty harsh critic.
Mm-hmm.
And then they kind of just please everybody else, right? And they kind of, but what happens is their needs are never met, and so that resentment builds, and then it might have other ways it might come out in different ways, maybe some level of addiction or other things that they have an outlet to kind of release that anger because they're so focused on pleasing people. Because again, they found that that's how they got noticed is like, if I'm perfect and pleased, then there's validation, I'm
Mm-hmm.
acknowledged, right?
Mm-hmm.
Versus the one who's kind of like, well, I'm going to get attention anyway, I'll fight, I'll do it that way. So
Mm-hmm.
those are kind of two things I see a lot with men.
Well, yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because I was literally just talking with Daniel about this last week. But and I think another thing that contributes to this is that as men, we feel like it's a noble to fall on the sword. We love to be
Yes.
martyrs, and
Hmm.
so we're like, yeah, I'm just gonna like suppress. I'm gonna die to everything because it's my job as a man to
Yeah.
just take care of everything around the house, whatever, right? And so
Right.
and because society sees that as noble, we want to do that. And so
Hmm.
sometimes it's like, and I think that's another reason why it's difficult because sometimes inside we may instinctually know that something is off or doesn't feel right or we need to say something, but then we might think, well, no, a good man will just die to everything because
Mm.
that's what he does for his family.
Right. 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 And that would be kind of like too far, right? Unbalanced.
Exactly.
Where the trait itself of sacrifice, there's good use of that to a degree, but if we go too far in that direction, well, then it's the sacrifice now is having detrimental effects on this person, which in turn will then affect those people in the end. And if you flip it the other way, if I don't sacrifice at all, ever, like it, right? If I'm too far on the extremes, they're both problematic. It's about the balance of, yes, as dads, we have to sacrifice 100%, often a lot. But we also got to care for myself too. If I over sacrifice and don't kind of read my own signs of caring for myself, well, then that over sacrifice is going to lead to burnout. It's going to lead to other issues with as a parent, as a dad, as a husband. And so it is really about that balance. You
Hmm.
have to, right?
Hmm. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about let's unpack anger because I know it's going to be statistically even speaking. I know there's going to be a lot of people listening to this episode that would struggle with anger, right?
Yep.
And say, okay, I get it, Mitch, I get it, Travis. I
Yep.
gotta keep it under control. But like,
Yep.
how do I do that? So I guess my question for you is, as well as you can articulate this in a short podcast episode, how can we as men just identify when maybe things are bubbling up, and
Hmm.
how do we prevent it from getting out of control and us losing our cool?
Probably smoking a lot of weed and drinking a lot of alcohol would be the
Mm,
way to do it.
good
Um,
start.
and now I say that with tongue in cheek, but the reality is, I think for a lot of men, why they do that is because it feels better.
Mm,
Because what does alcohol and weed do? And now I'm generalizing here, but think of go back to the nervous system. I know I harp on it, but once you understand why, you'll hear me and you'll understand in a second. Because in the nervous system state, if I'm stuck in kind of a heightened sympathetic, anger, frustrated state, and often think of all the stressors dads have, right? They got work, they got kids, they got their spouse, they got their own internal stuff going on. Um, and if I'm stuck in that state, if I don't have any skills or tools to help regulate and downshift, well, alcohol works great for that quickly. Weed does that, can. Uh, Numbing on social media can just distract your mind. Mindless work, kind of busy work, is another one I see a lot of men do to kind of feel better, to shift that state. But it often shifts them. And this is the branch that Dr. Porges discovered in the 90s with NICU babies, is it shifts them to what's called a dorsal state. So that is the branch that he discovered, which was it's more primitive than the sympathetic. Sympathetic is a mobilizing state of action. Dorsal is a state of immobilization. It's a state of numbing, disassociation, disconnection. Now it will feel quote unquote better because you're numb now. And
mm,
so, what does alcohol do? What do those things do? What does even numbing out on social media or binge watching shows or even overeating food? Is it what numbs? It moves you from this activation state and you get temporary relief. So, your nervous system feels a little better. So, it feels similar to actually true parasympathetic ventral energy, meaning
mhm,
calm, connect, but you're not connected, you're disconnected. So, there's a similar kind of groundedness to it. But the difference is the key difference is ventral is you're connected, meaning you're grounded and connected to yourself and those around you. Dorsal is you're disconnected and numb to yourself and those around you. And so it might have a similar effect, but it's not actually the problem with dorsal. And this is why a lot of men get so tired, men you've probably worked with who drink or overly stressed and kind of numbing out on TV or whatever they use, right? I mean, fill in the blank. I'm not just going to harp on alcohol and weed. It's so many other things that they can use. Um, is that they feel exhausted and tired. They don't feel any more energized. They feel more tired. And over time, that has diminishing returns. They now feel more tired, more exhausted, more easily frustrated, right? It's
mm,
almost like they become more frustrated more quickly now, right? Just it's almost like it's a quick, it's like it doesn't take much anymore.
mm,
And depending on what they're eating, they're probably not sleeping great. They're probably eating like crap, right? They're not doing any type of movement. And so all these things impact one another. And so, but again, the nervous system's job is what happens is they have this behavioral pattern and they learn and create this neural pathway to say, okay, when I feel this way, my automatic go-to is whatever the thing is for them. It's subconscious, it's automatic. They're not really thinking anymore. They're just doing it because they've done this probably for the past, I don't know, 5, 10, 15 years, probably.
mm,
And they've repeated that thousands of times. So when I work with men, I'm like, hey, you are an expert at this thing. So your body has learned that this works in the moment because your brain is not deciphering is this effective or ineffective for me. It's just saying, hey, this is working for what I need. And so let's just make this strong and keep doing the same thing. So it's not actually it's not interpreting and asking the question and consequences of, hey, what's the impact this is having on me and my family and my environment? No, it's just saying, hey, this is helping you calm down. So keep doing this thing.
mm.
And so it becomes easier and easier and easier. So it creates that connection like super, super strong in the brain and the body. And so what we have to do is begin to kind of understand why we're getting there and how do we insert different skills, which takes time and repetition, um, to shift states to actually get to ventral. So we need different things that can help us move and downshift our sympathetic energy of our fight flight down into ventral. And for some men that you've probably worked with, and I know that I have worked with, rarely, if ever, are in that state. Often they kind of live in that kind of sympathetic dorsal shutdown and maybe going all the way back to childhood. Now they might have moments of ventral, I'm not saying they're never there, but on the average, they're probably more in that kind of activated fight, flight, numbing out, overly stressed, right state. And so they learn that this is their normal. There really isn't a difference. And often with these men, when I do and get their narrative of their history, Often it's very classic, rigid norms of masculinity. They're often shamed for having certain feelings outside of anger. So they have this also story, this narrative in their head of, well, this is what men do. This is how men are. And I know that if I did this, I was shamed or shunned or hurt or left or whatever. So I'm never going to do that again. And so in a way, even having any other feeling outside of anger or maybe numbness, maybe happiness is kind of a threat. So sadness, anxiety, fear, worry, those are all threats to the nervous system. So guys get stuck on that too. They don't know how to deal with it because their nervous system says, hey, these are threats. Quickly drink. You don't want to feel that. You don't want to go there. So do this because that's not okay. Right. So the problem too is we have to also retrain the brain to say, hey, all emotions are valid. We need to learn how to listen and have higher emotional intelligence. So no, these are trying to signal something, going back to what you said earlier. But we have to, in a way, like, it's like working out, and this is a crappy analogy, but it works, is like you can't go in and lift, I don't know, 345 plates on each side for the first time and try and like, squat that, right? With never going to the gym. You can't. You're going to hurt yourself and you'll never be able to lift that bar. You have to start with just the bar itself. Just get used to what that feels like. And then over time, we got to build the strength and stamina and agility and muscle memory of that, just like emotions. So we have to kind of retrain, rewire. And I had to say that before I could say what to do, because we need to understand what's happening in order to actually understand how I'm getting stuck and why I'm getting stuck. Because it's not just the matter of will. And I think sometimes we get that wrong. If we negate and remove the nervous system and say, well, just, and sometimes we hear this in social media. It's like, well, just change, just feel, right? Just do this, like, right? Men just need to feel. They just need to do this. And so what's happening is, one, we're negating their narrative and story of why they are and how they got to where they are today. And so we're like saying, well, this doesn't matter. You just need to change right now. Now, I understand why they're saying they need to change, because I think they do. Yes, we need men to be healthier. But if we get rid of all this and don't help them understand why they're stuck, what's really going on for them, all this is going to do, like, you just need to feel better. It's going to put them more in shame, more aggression, more defensiveness, because that's all they know how to do. Because what you're telling them, you're threatening their nervous system, saying something's wrong with you, which they already think anyway about themselves, whether they want to admit it or not. And so saying that is just reinforcing the already narrative they have running in their head, and they're just going to put their fist to the wall, whatever it is that you don't want them to do, because that's what they know. And so we have to be curious, understand the guy's story, in order to actually go to the change piece.
Mhm.
Now, pause if you want to say anything first, because I want to jump into a couple skills, but I want
Actually, I
to
did have
give
a
you some
question.
space. Yes.
Yeah, no, it's all good. So, I mean, really what we're talking about here is neuroplasticity, right? Like
Yep.
your ability
Yes.
to change.
Yes.
And this is one of the most fascinating things that when I learned about neuroplasticity and how you can change the way you think, change your behaviors. I mean, when you really unpack it, it's incredible what we're
Yeah.
capable of. How the
Yes.
brain is such a highly adaptive
Mm-hmm.
organ. I I was thinking about this the other day when I was running, and I'm referencing this, how easy it is to just fall into old patterns versus
Mm-hmm.
start new ones. I was training. We were training for to run a Spartan race, a half marathon, and so we were running trails and stuff. And we got off trail, and we started running on a pavement trail, which is beautiful and so easy and amazing. It got out because we want to try something different, and this was a just kind of a giant hill in the middle of the city I live in. And then we got off the trail, but then all of a sudden the trail sort of disappeared, and we were like running through the trees, and I was like getting so agitated because I'm like, this path is so hard to run because branches are getting in the way. I've never run this way.
Yeah.
There's bugs, there's rocks, and it's
Yeah.
exhausting doing this, right?
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
and immediately I saw the paved path in the distance, and I'm like, oh, that would be so much easier to run on. And
Sure.
but I knew that the direction that I needed to go required me to continue on this path. And I
Yeah.
was like daydreaming of like, man, if I could just get, if I could, it would just be so much easier if I got on this pavement path, you know?
Yeah.
And I thought in that moment, like, man, isn't that so much like
Mm.
forming new habits? Isn't that so much like
Yep.
neuroplasticity of like, it is so much easier to come home and drink than
Sure.
face your problematic marriage, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And everybody wants to just run on that easy path because like you said, our brains are expert. We become experts with these new neural pathways or
Yeah.
these old neural pathways, sorry. And to
Mm-hmm.
create new ones are so difficult.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Yeah. And that also speaks to Dr. Dan Siegel's work on his concept of what he called the window of tolerance.
Mm.
Right. So our window of tolerance is like a window that can expand or shrink. And so essentially, if we have stuff in our life that keeps us within our window of tolerance, it means that we can effectively address whatever it is that's the stress is evoking in us.
Mm-hmm.
And we have the tools and skills necessary to effectively address whatever those stressors might be. That's our window. So the problem is when we get out of our window, whether hyper or hypo. So hyper, again, thrusts us into a sympathetic fight flight. Hypo thrusts us into a shutdown state, which again, those are nervous system states. They're not bad. They serve a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
But if we do that too often, and that could come from our environment growing up, to like our physical environment, to our social environment, our cultural environment, right? All these things impact us. And so it could shrink our window. So meaning we have less tolerance before we get thrust into a survival kind of shutdown state.
Mm.
So a lot of these men too is, if you think about it, like their window is often, it's shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. So it doesn't take much for them to like get overwhelmed or into that anger, aggressive state. And so they're going to need to use whatever the thing is more to help the regulation.
Mm.
And so it's kind of like they're losing stamina, losing agility, almost like an atrophy type of a thing, where they can't do much with it until it's like they're already at that state. And so it shrinks and shrinks and shrinks. And again, a lot of things that go into that, like I said, relationships, environment, trauma, a lot of things. And so part of it is we need to expand our window of tolerance. And often that's through skill training, right? Which for a lot of men, it's like, yeah, teach skills. Yes, you need skills. And that's when coaching, like a coach who's aware of this or a therapist who's aware of working with men is like, yeah, we need to teach you skills because you do need skills. You need to understand the basics of what's happening physiologically within emotions and in your body. So it's not just a thought, it's a physiological, bodily, subconscious reaction that we need to work on the kind of the mind-body connection, the mind-body awareness, have language of the body, language of emotion, become familiar with it. And as we do that, and we have breathwork exercises, a bunch of different things we could do to expand our window of tolerance. One, so we have more capacity to deal with and more things to effectively address whatever it is. It's kind of like if you're a construction worker or build whatever, doing some type of project and all you bring is a hammer, right? Hammers are great when you got to nail something in, but if you can't nail in a screw, I guess you could, or trying to nail, if you're trying to cut wood and nail, use a hammer to cut wood, like you're going to be exhausted and just give up and say, forget this and walk away. Like we need different tools for different situations. We can't just, like anger is like, it's like the hammer. It's like, it's great when you need it and when it's effective, but for anything else, it's not effective. But if that's all you know, you're just going to keep using it because that's all you got. So you're going to get mad at yourself when it doesn't work, or get mad at your boss or whoever when it doesn't work, right? You're going to get mad. You're going to direct that anger somewhere, inward or external. So we need skills. We have to learn skills. And that's the piece that I think where men really do a good job when you give them a skill to practice. Now, they got to practice it. And that's also the hard part, consistency. The trail running thing is it's not always like within a week they're done. It's like, no, it takes a little longer than that. And you're going to want to give up. You want to go old patterns because those old patterns are so hardwired. It's easy to slip into it. That's a really deep groove in the brain. It's like that's like a gutter ball. It's like it doesn't take much to kind of slip into that path. And so what I teach men too is even when you slip into it, even the awareness of slipping into it and pausing in the midst of it is practicing creating a new neural pathway. And so it's like, don't beat yourself for slipping. Work on recognizing when you slip. And pausing and now even reflecting, oh, I'm here. Even the acknowledgement of where you are is practicing conscious awareness, mind-body awareness, which is also kind of practicing even a rep of like, okay, I'm here now. This is where I'm at. Okay. And then we can start to do the next thing of like, let's try this instead, try this skill maybe beforehand or whatever. So we have to do kind of incremental steps. And depending on the guy, it could be big leaps, it could be smaller baby steps. But nonetheless, we have to find where they are and what skills do they need to help them get back on that path or that new path that they really need.
Gentlemen, listen, I want to interrupt you just for 30 seconds to tell you something that I'm personally so excited about, and that is the fact that I've launched an exclusive private Facebook community for the members of Dad Nation. And so if you are listening to this and you are a man, and you're a husband or a father or you're soon to be, this place is a safe space for you to come and ask any questions you have. Maybe there are things that you are having a hard time with, a challenge you're facing, and your family's not always the right place to vent about these things. Iron sharpens iron, and men just need to get around one another, support one another, and to help each other out. So listen, if that is you, if you're lacking community, if you're lacking support, or you're just feeling like you need some encouragement or safe place to talk about the things that are challenging you most, nothing is off the table, because this is a private community and we all make an agreement to keep the content confidential. So if that's you, I want you to hit up the link that's going to be posted in the show notes below and then apply to be a part of this group. There is a bit of an application process, just a couple questions you have to answer. And so hit the link and sign up, and we will see you on the inside. Well, yeah, it's great. I agree. We need skills. I just looked at the time and I was like, holy cow,
I just realized that.
how has it already been this long? Dude, it's so good.
Might need a part 2.
As they say, time flies.
Yes.
Okay, well, why don't you, or I won't tell you what to do. Could you give us some tips and tools? I know we're talking about some high level, heavy things that are hard to really unpack, but for the man listening, what's something that he can take away from this episode? Like, I can try this. I think I can do this,
Yeah. It's a great question. And whoever's listening, you can do this. Absolutely. Definitely don't give up on anything. You could always do this. It's never too late to change. Going back to neuroplasticity, that no matter how old you are, the cool thing is the brain is adaptive and you could always learn something new. And even listening to this podcast, like even listening and trying to apply, this is part of that process. So you're not stuck forever. It might feel that way. And for some guys listening, it could feel like you have a lot ahead of you. So just focus on just this next step, and I'm stealing from like business books, like just what's 1% better, because it does make sense. Like, don't go at 100. It's like, what's 1% better than yesterday? Just do that, whatever that is. Or what's 0.5% better than yesterday? What's 0.1% something that's even better? Start there and think about, for you, whoever's listening, think about your current context, because I can't speak to all of you right now, is where are you right now? And what would be like 1%, 0.5%, 1/4% better. Now, a skill that I like to teach that over time will become more and more useful. In the beginning, you may or may not notice, because the problem is that any new skill, it's not going to be as quote unquote short-term, instant effective as whatever the heck you've been doing. So that's the thing, is it won't compete initially. It just won't. Like I tell people this with your drinking, I can't compete with alcohol. I cannot compete in that instantaneous moment of how fast it acts. This skill won't be able to do that right now, because it won't. It can't. You're learning a whole new skill. You're trying to rewire the brain and the body. And so with that, you're not going to notice much. So don't give up. You keep at it. And this is something that you related to in your own story, right? Initially, it's like anything. It's like it takes time. And so the one skill I would say to start with for you today, and this is a skill, I didn't generate this skill, like I'm not reinventing the wheel. This is from my clinical training and expertise that I've just learned. But one skill I like to teach is it's the stop skill, which is probably what you teach your kids. Maybe some of you out there. And the stop skill is really a 4-parter. And S is stop. It's literally stop. Just stop what you're doing. Just wherever you are, just notice what's going on and stop. Maybe physically stop. You might need to like just stop moving. You might need to mentally stop. It might be both mentally and physically, but just stop. And then take a step back and take a breath. So one of the best things you could do with this skill, and this is just a great skill work anyway, is breath work. And when you're activated in some type of sympathetic anger, you want to do a breath work pattern specifically with something that has a longer exhale with a shorter inhale. Why does that matter? Because physiologically, and this is the connection with the polyvagal theory in the nervous system, is when you inhale, your heart rate increases. This is just even right now. That's why heart rates kind of go up and down, up and down, up and down. Because every time you inhale, it increases. Every time you exhale, it decreases. And it's just kind of what happens. So that's the heart rate variability. So when you breathe in for, let's say, 3 to 4 seconds, in the nose into the belly, maybe pause for a second to the top, exhale at least six, 5, 6, 7, 8 seconds. So longer exhale than you're in, because that's allowing the heart rate variability to drop lower, which then begins to slow down your nervous system. So that's why breathing is not just for people with tight yoga pants, and something that just monks do, like in a monastery, although they do these things, but they do it because actually it works. And scientifically, it actually affects the brain and the body to slow down. And what that does over time, as you begin to practice this breathwork pattern, do it for about a minute or two, maybe a minute, even start with 30 seconds. Start with something you can do. So in for 4, out for 6, something like that. Find your breath work, and eventually you'll be able to get a longer exhale as you learn to control your breathing, because it takes a little bit of practice. I usually do 8 to 10 seconds out now, because I find that more relaxing for me. And so what that does too to your vagus nerve, again, it communicates to that part of your nervous system. It's okay, the threat, let's slow down, because if you could breathe like that, there's no threat around. Right? Eating, by the way, can also do that. Chewing gum, because when you're eating, you don't really eat when there's threat, right? So breathe out, in for 4, out for 6, take a step back. So stop, take a breath, and then observe. Just pay attention. What just happened? So observe your surroundings, observe like your internal world, like what just happened that activated this anger? Was it your kids? Was it your boss? Was it an email? Was it a look on someone's face? What was it? And just describe it to yourself without judgment. Just like, what are the facts? Like who, what, when, where. No why, because why is when we start to have assumptions and judgments. Let go of the why. Who, what, when, where. What happened? And just see if you could identify what led to what. And then once you can do that, P is proceed mindfully, meaning what would be an effective response right now? And if you get to the P, if you do the S and the T, even starting there is going to be a game changer. Just starting just to like stop and take a breath or two. That's even going to begin to shift your automatic physiological response to begin to shift states, because you're so used to automatically responding. So even stopping and taking a breath is kind of shifting that path and creating a new pathway. So you might not be able to really observe effectively right away. That's okay. Just start with the S and the T. Then observe, then proceed mindfully. And mindfully is, again, what's effective? What would I need to do to best address this situation? Is anger appropriate? Is that an appropriate response? And if it is, then sure, go for it. And then in the anger, what would be an appropriate kind of manifestation of that? Then do that. Or is what I'm feeling not an appropriate matching emotional state to what's happening in this moment? And if it's not, that's when we could dig deeper. Okay, then what is? What is the feeling? What's really there? And then maybe proceed with that. So this is kind of I like the stop skills, because you start small and you could build and expand on that skill. So you could be really minimal with it to really deep with it. So that's a skill I would start with.
Wow, love that, man. Yeah, you're so right. The breathing is so huge. I talk with men about that often. Just the ability to stop in the moment, practice your breathing, and if you can step out of the room even for a moment, asking your wife for just, hey, can I take a few minutes? I just need to take a beat. But even that, like being able to stop in that moment and say, hey, I think I need to step back and, step into the office, step into the garage, whatever you need to do. I mean, even that for some people, that's progress.
Yeah.
And I think as men, at least for men like myself who are driven by like achievements and like, very goal driven, it's like, man, if we walk out of if I lost my cool and, had a fight, I just like, I might have done things in the moment that were great, but I won't acknowledge it because I didn't win the whole thing. I didn't do the whole thing correctly.
Right.
Right. So I think it's important to acknowledge that, like you said, what is 0.5%? What is 1%? And hey, maybe if you stopped and recognized in the moment that you felt anger, right? And you asked yourself in the moment, how should I respond to this?
Yeah.
But then continue to lose your cool. Hey, at least just like that's progress, right?
Right. You're right. That even stopping is progress. Even if you lose your cool after, like you're right, because that the shift is you're doing something different than everything, and it's often looks more realistically like that, where
Yes.
you stop and then you're back in it again. and you're
Yeah.
about to stop again. Great. I mean, you're trying to shift like automatic autopilot, which takes a
Mm-hmm.
lot of energy. Like
Mm-hmm.
it really does to like be aware. It's
Mm-hmm.
not, it really is not easy in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and something else I would say to this practice of the stop skill, by the way, is if you want it to be even more effective, and I'm gonna harp on it again. You'll probably love it. Is practice some basic breathing skills like every day, outside of like a heightened state of aggression and anger, because that's kind of like game time. Like it's like match day. So you have to be like going to practice. So then when you get to like a game, i.e., getting activated in anger, so you kind of have some muscle memory to do what you need to do. So if you're only practicing that in the heightened state of anger, it's gonna just take much longer to be effective there, and you're probably gonna want to give up because your muscle memory is not there. So practice, I would say every day. Sorry, I know it's an everyday practice. Just start with like 30 seconds. Breathing in for 3 to 4 seconds, exhale 5 to 6. Just notice what that feels like in your body. Just begin to just do that on the way to work. You could do it driving. I mean, before you log on your computer, sit down for 30 seconds. In the shower, do it, just take 30 and then build to a minute. Just
Mm-hmm.
begin to practice that. So in the height of anger, you'll be more likely to be successful to actually do that stop and breathing skill.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a caveat I'd add, is that you want to try and practice outside of the heat of those heightened states.
That's an enormous caveat and a very important caveat.
Yeah.
So
So
one of the things that I studied in school back in the early days. I'm an old guy now, but back in the day when I went to school, uh, I studied vocal performance. Right, so actually did a classical degree,
nice.
and so yeah. But a huge part of learning how to perform,
Hmm.
aka execute something, is to simulate the environment you're in, to get to practice some of those responses, visualizing being there.
Yeah.
And so I would go to the venue that I was going to be singing in.
Yeah.
I would turn up the
Yeah.
lights. I would visualize people in the room. I would
Yeah.
actually breathe as though I would be breathing when I was singing. I would sing the
Hmm.
songs. I would do everything I could to visualize and practice each moment so that instinctually so that my nervous system would respond in a similar way.
Yeah.
Because if I didn't develop those skills outside of the concert, how could I ever expect to execute while I'm in the middle of the concert? You understand what I
Yeah.
mean?
No,
And
no,
I see
100%.
some parallels here with
Yeah.
what we're talking about.
Yeah. I did the same thing, and I was in choir and all that kind of stuff growing up.
Hmm,
So same thing, practicing in sports too. You
totally.
envision winning the touchdown, right? That catch, right? It's the same concept,
Hmm.
right? We just need to like reclaim it. Say, hey, this also works for this, guys. It's not just for sport. It's like there's a reason why these sports performance coaches or musicians do this, because they
Hmm.
know it works. So we just need to do it in this environment too, that it's
Hmm.
just as effective. And think of this, dads, like those men and dads listening, like think of yourself as a high performance athlete, but every day is game day.
I love it.
Like every day is game day. Like unless like unless you're someone has your kids and you're just with your spouse, but even that could be game day depending on your relationship in that moment. And so it's like every day you got to be able to perform. And so what are you doing to rest and recover and train yourself to be able to perform and be able to be successful and effective in that moment?
I love
Right.
that, dude. What a
So
great reframe.
yeah.
Every day is game day. The boys are going to like that one.
Yeah, I hope so.
Um, hey, we're going to get back to the episode, but while I have you here, I wanted to ask you, would you consider helping a brother who's struggling in his life right now? Maybe it's a guy searching the internet to help save his marriage, his health, or his family. Maybe it's a man that's just behind you on this journey. And we know, statistically speaking, there are thousands of men doing this, and we know that there are probably men in your social circles that are struggling with some of these very same things. If you'd be willing to help, this is how you can help, and I promise it'll take less than 60 seconds. If you've gotten any value from this podcast so far, would you be willing to give us an honest review and subscribe to our channel, whatever channel you're listening on? If you want to take this to the next level, would you consider sending this link to a friend of yours who you know would benefit from listening to this show? Now, why would you do that? Because the more men that hear this content, the more marriages we can save, the more fathers we can help step up, and the more lives that we can change forever. This isn't just for the men. This is for the wives, the children, and the generations to come. So I want to say thank you so much for doing your part to help other men find the support that they need. Now let's get back to it. Cool, man. Well, hey, we got to wrap it up.
Yeah, man.
But definitely gonna have to do part two.
Absolutely.
But hey, one last question for you.
Yep.
And I ask every guest this on the show. You're a father, you're a husband,
Yes.
leader, therapist, all these things. You think a lot about life, obviously. You think a lot about your thoughts.
I do.
I often think about my death because I believe that it will inform how I ought to live. I
Hmm.
often think about the life, the legacy that I'm leaving for
Hmm.
my family. So I want you to picture for me. Speaking of visualization, not don't visualize too much, but you have passed away. Your family is mourning you, right? The funeral has just been over. Everyone's left the house, and it's just your wife and your kids, and they're sitting around the table. And you have the ability to have this out of body experience or a fly on the wall. And your wife and your kids are just reminiscing about you, the father you were, the husband you were, and you're able to hear your kids talk about
Hmm.
who you were, the dad you were. What are some of the things that you would hope that you would want your children to speak about the man that you were and the husband or the father that you were to them?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. And I also understand why you don't want to visualize too much for some people, because that could be overwhelming. But yeah, for me, I've actually I've thought about this, and it's always fun to play with more than like one word. But I think some things I would love my kids to be able to say about me, which is what I'm trying to do now to set the stage. And that's also to some degree that I can't control all of that, as I can only control what I do, but I can't always control how my children perceive. But I think what I would love for them to know is that that he listened well, that he listened to me. I felt heard and seen by him. Um, that we had fun and he played with me. Um, I know that I was enough and loved by him. Um, and that he kind of encouraged and challenged me to continue to grow. Like those are some things I would love to be able to hear, is that, yeah, it's the relationship and the connection and the safety and the trust and the encouragement, and that they feel, again, appreciated, loved, and heard by me. That yeah, I think those are things that I would love to be able to hear that one day, because I think I will have an outer body experience to be able to hear those things. I would like to hope,
Mm-hmm.
and to be able to experience that on that end, whatever that end is,
Mm-hmm.
because those are things that I hear so much from the people that I work with, that are longing for essentially that kind of relationship with their father,
Mm-hmm.
that they wish they had or would like to have and can't have, or are unable to have, given just kind of the circumstance. So that to me would be a win, a success as a dad, would be that, not even finances, not any of that stuff. It's more of the relationship, and then they know who they are and their identity. So that's my mission. And for them to kind of give away something better, to be better than me,
Mm.
to hopefully grow farther than what I even taught them.
Love
That
that.
their kids, they can take what they learned from me, and keep pushing this forward, whatever this is for them, and evolve it, update it to whatever that is, 2, 3.0, 4.0, and take it farther.
Love it.
Um, yeah.
Cool. Thank you for sharing, brother.
Yeah.
I think that question just reveals the heart so much, and reveals what really connects with us on a deep level. Last question for those who are listening to this who have never heard of you, they're going to want to connect with you, find you on the old interwebs. So where can people find you, and how can we get more of you or support you and all that?
Good question. So I'm out there in different places, but Instagram is obviously for a lot of people quick and easy. It's Integrated Man Project. For the IG, that's also the name of the podcast, Integrated Man Project, on Apple and Spotify. Also on Google or YouTube now, I think, because it's now YouTube that owns it, versus Google Cast, whatever it was. You could also find me on YouTube, which is a mix of my podcast plus other just kind of long form mental wellness coaching kind of information slash skills training. So that's just youtube.com/, my name, Travis Goodman. Goodman is how you spell it. So you'll find me out there. And you could also email me my website, So here's the thing. I'm a dad of 3 and all those things. And so some things I do really, really well, and some things I slack on and delay on. I'm totally, I have no shame in it. Like, I get it. Like, I understand. So my website will be up soon. I've been revamping it. I just haven't hit publish. So it will be integratedmanproject.com or travisgoodmantherapy.com. They're gonna go to the same place. So I didn't like it, took it down, and been trying to rebuild it, at night when my kids are asleep, stuff like that. So because of that, eventually check it out. It will be there. And there'll be ways to book with me, but you could email me directly. And if you want to book coaching or therapy, if you're in California for therapy, I'm more than happy to talk to you about it. If you want to pick my brain about different things, I want to help you out. So if all that we do is connect and talk, even if we don't work together, I can at least get you to someone who can work with you, even if it's not me. Because my heart is to help who's ever asking. I want to be some type of path or response. I don't want to leave someone hanging. So I think that's, if you're asking, for a lot of men, by the way, and you're seeking help, and for some men, that's like a big deal for the first time. So know that I will take that seriously and respond, even if it means we don't actually work together. I will do something to make sure you're connected to some other resource so you can get the help you need that's effective for where you are. Because I want to honor that. I want to respect and honor your reaching and your risk to ask and reach out, because I know for some that's a big barrier for some people. And there'll be an announcement coming soon. I'll be actually the new host of the Polyvagal Theory podcast. The Institute's gonna be launching a podcast, so I'm gonna be actually the host of that. That's very exciting. I just found this out, and so we're kind of building up to season 1 TBD. So that'll be fun. So Polyvagal Institute, check them out. They're great if you want to get training through them. But they're launching a podcast, and I'm very excited to be their host. So that's kind of a fun development with them. I'm really excited to partner with them and what they're doing. So I really believe in how they're growing, and I want to be part of that. So,
well, congrats, man. New. That's exciting.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, those of you who are listening, everything he mentioned, I'm going to put them in the show notes below on whatever platform you are listening or watching on. Do not hesitate to reach out, as I just want to echo what Travis said. Even a simple DM, a text, is an enormous step. So many men don't. They don't even do that, and they continue to live in darkness and fear and struggle. So do not struggle in silence. Consider this your encouragement. Travis, thank you so much for being on the show today. Just appreciate your time, and appreciate your message and your vision. And I just wish you all the best, man, going forward.
Yeah, you too, Mitchell. Thanks, dude, for having me on.
Wow, what an incredible episode. Listen, if you are watching on YouTube today, I want to hear from you, okay? Leave it in the comments below. What was the big takeaway for you? What was that big aha moment? And let's start the conversation. If you've listened to this episode and you've decided that you want help today, if you need coaching, if you need some resources, feel free to please reach out to me. My email is mitchell@dadnationco.com. My website is dadnationco.com. You can hit me up on Instagram @dadnationco. And I've got a ton of resources for you. I'm here to help you, support you in any way I can, and to serve you in a powerful way. So check those links. I'll have them posted below. But other than that, listen, I'm here for you. I'm in your corner. Have an incredible week. We'll catch up soon.